Alrighty, hello and welcome back everybody to the channel. So today we're going to be doing a continuation of the Supreme Commander Science series, I think is what I'm calling it. And at this one, I promised this one for a while. I ran into a lot of testing issues on this one. So basically what we're going to talk about are the pros and cons of each destroyer in their respective navies and how each one fit kind of into the overall story, strengths that they have, weaknesses that they may have, and then how you can potentially counter or exploit a weakness in your opponent's fleet. So before we get into that though, I really want to thank everybody for watching. The channel has grown substantially more recently, and I know that that's substantially by smaller counts where we're getting like 10 views instead of like 2, but I really appreciate you guys for being here. If you do like what you see, please hit the like button. If for no other reason, it's extremely motivating to me. It has really nothing to do with any monetary gain or anything like that. It's just very motivating to me to know that people actually like my content. But only do that if you like it. You don't have to compromise your own standards in order to say that you actually like something that you don't like. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the test criteria. So the way that I did this is I set up a series of tests. So there are roughly 18 tests or so. And the tests range from ship-to-ship combat with sub-defense. So I didn't mix in anti-air into this because most destroyers are pretty bad on the anti-air front. The Exodus has no anti-air to speak of. And the Salem, Valiant, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the Seraphim destroyers' names, have subpar anti-air at best. You should be mixing cruisers into that fleet mix in order to get some anti-air coverage in there. So ship-to-ship combat and sub-defense were the primary ones that I'm going to be testing for. So basically what I did was I ran a test of every destroyer against every other destroyer, and we mapped out who came out on top for our first ship-to-ship combat test. So versus destroyers, the Valiant is the winner. The Valiant UEF destroyer was pretty much undefeated by any other destroyer, including the renowned Salem, Seraphim destroyer, and the Exodus with its high alpha strike damage. The Valiant, as far as ship-to-ship combat, was the winner, and I will attribute that to the slightly higher DPS of its deck guns. So the deck guns that the Valiant has put off, I believe, a combined 250 damage per second. I can double check that real quick. Give me 1 second. Yep, so combined 250 versus the Aeon, which is roughly at 210, Salem at 230, and Uashiva Destroyer at 250 as well. But the Seraphim Destroyer has lower health. So as far as the ship-to-ship combat, we have a pretty decisive winner versus destroyers as far as just which one can output more damage and kill another one faster. The Valiant is going to be the winner. But unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily tell the whole story, though, right? Because there's a lot of different scenarios where destroyers are a lot of different scenarios in combat where destroyers are going to be getting into. So the next ship-to-ship combat that I tested was versus kind of a wolf pack of frigates, if you will. And so the wolf pack, quote unquote, of frigates, it was 8 frigates versus a destroyer from each faction. And so on this one, the Valiant and the Exodus actually tied. So 5 frigates survived from each of the actual tests. And so there's a couple reasons I believe for this. First off, the Valiant has a relatively high fire rate and a relatively high damage per shot. The Exodus has extremely high alpha damage, so each shot is devastating from the Exodus, but it takes it roughly like 5 seconds to fire. And I think that helps them a lot in this test, whereas the Salem will have wasted shots due to its high fire rate where they'll hit the water before it switches targets after one dies. And then similar with the Seraphim Destroyer. So the beam weapons will be sweeping across the water and not necessarily damaging any units. So Valiant and Exodus, as far as being able to fight off frigates, are going to be your best bet there, just due to their slightly lower fire rate and better ability to switch targets without any wasted shots. So let's flip the coin then, and we'll talk a little bit about subs. So there were 2 tests on this side versus T1 subs and T2 subs. So for the T1 subs, I used the Tiger Shark UEF sub, and for T2 sub killers, I used the Barracuda of the Siren, if I can remember correctly. So in this one, this is really where we see the Valiant fall off. So the Valiant was the winner in the first one versus Destroyers, and then tied with the Exodus on the frigate side. But it really falls off here on versus subs. And there's a couple of faction reasons from a balance perspective why this is. The UEF have access to both Bulwark shield boats as well as Coopers, which are torpedo boats. And so there is a lot of supplementary ships that can help the Valiant whenever it's versing subs. Coopers are incredibly strong versus submarines, and then the Bulwarks can also give it a little bit of extra health and a little bit of extra shields whenever it is in combat. So getting to who kind of won this one. So for versus T1 subs, this was a tie between the Salem and the Exodus. So the Exodus is turning out to be relatively a pretty decent all-round ship. In the ship-to-ship versus Destroyers, the Exodus kind of came out second. So it's a good all-round for pretty much everything except for anti-air. So versus T1 subs, it ties with the Salem, and versus Destroyers, it came in second versus the Valiant. So I'll chalk this up to a couple of different things. First off, the Salem orients itself in a really interesting way. The AI, whenever you automatically attack it, it orients itself in an interesting way, and the the torpedo defense from the Salem seems to be vastly more effective than a lot of the other ones. The Exodus has, I believe, higher damage torpedoes, even though I think the FAF database is lacking an entry for Exodus torpedoes. Its torpedoes seem to be far more devastating than the other ships of its class. Shifting to, lastly, T2 sub-killers, the Exodus wins in this one. There are 2 Barracudas that survive in this category. And so again, chalk this up to the Exodus just having a better torpedo defense. And this is all due to balance, right? Where because the Aeon don't have anti-air on their destroyers, however weak the anti-air is, it does help. But also because they don't have a Cooper or a torpedo boat. Even though they do have the Vespers, the Exodus does slug it out relatively well in the torpedo game versus T2 sub-killers or T2 sub-hunters. So I'll wrap this up. And the first thing I want to say is this is not an explanation of which destroyer is best, right? This is a test of these destroyers in different scenarios. And so we can't necessarily point to one particular destroyer and say this is the one that you should 100% use. Really what this means is that you should, if you are a naval player, you should take a lot of things into consideration as far as who you're versing, what your factional strengths are on the Navy side. So if you're versing somebody like a Cybran, UEF could be a really good option there because Valiants will absolutely kick Salem's butts. And then the Coopers can absolutely take apart Barracudas. So it's an explanation of kind of the pros and cons of each destroyer. It's not meant to be this destroyer is best and you should always play this particular faction in this particular situation. So some surprises that for me came out of this test. I have always looked at the Aeon Navy as inferior in some stances. And I think that that's partially because they have just very low fire rate, very slow moving projectiles. I feel like I end up missing a lot whenever I play Aeon on the Navy. But the Exodus really slugged it out really well in this test versus frigates, versus the destroyers, and versus the subs. So it was the winner or tied on the sub side, and versus the destroyer it came in second, and versus the frigates it tied for first. So Exodus is a really good ship, and that one surprised me a little bit. But anyway, I will wrap this up. I hope you guys learned something as far as the strengths and weaknesses of each ship. And if you got any questions, comments, concerns, down in the put them down in the comments section. I don't know where I'm trying to go with this, but put it down in the comments section. I always love hearing feedback as far as how I'm testing things and the way that I'm kind of looking at each of these units and how they should be behaving. And if you guys know if there is a particular reason why you think that my testing results are skewed or unfair, definitely leave it in the comments below. I will definitely take a look at it, just like I did my adjacency bonus test in the last video. And you might get another video out of it where I might either confirm or recant the findings that I found in the initial test. But anyway, I will go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.